What's going on, besties? Today we're going to be talking about TEAS version 7 English, more specifically, knowledge of language. Let's get started. So let's talk about the differences between complete and incomplete sentences. What exactly is a sentence fragment? So a sentence fragment occurs when essential parts of a sentence are missing, resulting in an incomplete sentence. For a sentence to be considered complete and whole, it needs to have both a subject and a predicate. The subject tells you what or who the sentence is about, and the predicate explains what the subject is doing or being. Consider the sentence, roses are red. Here, roses is the subject of what we are discussing, and are red is the predicate. It describes what the subject is doing or how it is. Since this sentence includes both a subject and a predicate, it qualifies as a complete sentence. Next, let's examine more sentence fragments and learn how we can transform them into complete sentences. In our example, drinks coffee every morning, something is missing from this sentence. What part of our sentence is absent? Well, that's right, we're missing the subject. Who's drinking coffee every morning? If we add the subject Mr. Cheung, it becomes a complete sentence. Mr. Cheung drinks coffee every morning. Let's take a look at the following sentences and figure out what's wrong with them. The first one we have is American geese. Well, we have a subject, but we don't have a predicate. So in this case, we could say, American geese fly south for the winter. By adding fly south for the winter, it gives us a predicate. It's telling us what the geese are doing. American geese fly south for the winter, making it a complete sentence. Next, we have slept in the tent. In this case, we have a predicate. We know what's happening. We just don't have a subject. Who is sleeping in the tent? If we add the subject word he, it gives us our subject, and now we can combine that with our predicate. He slept in the tent, making it a complete sentence. In our last example, the bedroom. In this case, we have a subject. We know we're speaking of the bedroom, but we have no predicate. What about the bedroom? What is being done, and what is its characteristic? By adding the predicate is clean, we can now form a complete sentence. The bedroom, which is our subject, is clean, which is our predicate. As always, there are always exceptions to the rule. In an imperative sentence or command, the subject is not required. When giving a command or instruction to someone, the subject is implicitly understood. Here are several examples of imperative sentences or commands that lack explicit subjects, yet they're still considered complete sentences. These can include stop it, go straight, put your shoes on, turn off the light. While these sentences only contain predicates, they are complete because they function as commands. We talked extensively about transition words throughout reading and English. Understanding how transition words are used on the ATI TEAS is going to be very important when you're taking your test. So what are transitions? Transitions are words, phrases, or sentences that link one idea to another, facilitating a smooth flow between thoughts and reducing readers' confusion. Without clear transitions, writing can appear disjointed and fail to convey the connections between sentences and paragraphs. In this section of the TEAS, you will need to be familiar with agreement, opposition, cause, effect, examples, conclusions, chronology, and location transition words. These are some common examples of what the ATI TEAS has deemed as the most important transition words to know for your test. Next, let's talk about verb tenses. The verb tense indicates the time when an action described by the verb takes place. There are 9 verb tenses you will need to know for the TEAS, organized into past, present, and future, each further divided into 3 categories: simple, perfect, and progressive. Starting with past simple. This tense describes the actions that have already occurred. The structure typically involves the subject plus the verb in past form. For example, I walked to work today. This construction clearly places the action in the past. With past perfect, this tense is used to describe an action that was completed before another action in the past. The typical structure consists of the subject followed by the word had, followed by the verb in its past form. An example of this could be, he had visited China. A big key memory tip when it comes to perfect tense verbs is you're always going to see the word has, have, and had when you're reading the sentences. If you can identify one of these three words in the sentence and the question is asking about perfect tense, then you're automatically going to be ahead of the game. Lastly, we have past progressive tense. This tense describes an ongoing action in the past, which may have been interrupted by another event. The structure consists of the subject followed by was or were plus the verb ending in ing. For example, we were walking home when I got the call. This sentence shows that the action of walking home is ongoing when the call was received. Another thing that's important to know is whenever we have progressive past tenses, you are going to see the words was, were, and will plus the verb and ing. There are certain instances when we would use was, were, and will. So if the subject is I, she, he, or it, we use the progressive tense was. If the subject is we, they, and you, we use the progressive tense were. Next, let's move on to our present tenses. So starting with present simple tense. This tense is used to describe actions, habits, or facts that are generally true and occur regularly in the present. The structure typically involves the subject plus the verb in its present form. An example of this could be I, which is the subject, walk, which is the verb in present form, to work every day. This sentence indicates a habitual action that takes place in the present. It's important to understand that whenever we have a subject like I, you, we, and they, we do not add an S to the end of our verb. However, if the subject is she, he, and it, we do add the S to the end of our verb. So if we say I walk, you work, we go, they visit, it would be different than saying she walks, he works, or it goes. Make sure that you know the difference for that when it comes to the TEAS. Present perfect tense. When we're talking about this one, the tense describes an action that has occurred once or several times before the present moment. The structure of this kind of sentence will be the subject plus have or has, and the verb is going to remain in past form. That is the biggest key indicator I can give you whenever we're talking about perfect tense, is that verb, no matter which one we're talking about, past, present, or future, is always going to remain in past form. So in this example, we have they, which is our subject, have traveled, which have is our perfect present tense, traveled is our verb in its past form, to China twice. This sentence indicates that the action of traveling to China has happened in the past and is relevant to the present. Typically, when the subject is I, we, you, and they, we're going to use have, and we have the subject she, he, and it, we're going to use the word has. And then lastly, we have present progressive tense. This tense is used to describe the action that is currently ongoing. The structure includes the subject plus am, is, or are, and the verb ending in ing. So like we saw before, we have a different set of words that we're going to have to remember. So for present progressive tense, am, is, and are going to be the most common words that you're going to see. If the subject is I, then we use the word am. If the subject is she, he, or it, we're going to use the word is. And if the subject is we, you, and they, we're going to use the word are. So like we see in our example, I, which is the subject, am, which is our present progressive tense, studying, which is our verb plus ing for the exam, is a great example of a present progressive tense. And lastly, we're going to look at all of our future tenses, starting with future simple tense. This tense is used to describe actions that have not yet occurred. There are three common structures when forming future simple tense. With structure one, we have the subject plus am, is, are, going to, plus our verb. So an example of this could be, I am going to the store. Structures 2 format is the subject plus am, is, or are, plus the verb ending in ing. This example could be, I am starting my TEAS course this week. And then our last structure is the subject plus will or shall and the verb. We will take our TEAS on Thursday. And next up we have future perfect tense. So this tense is used to describe an action that will have been completed by a specific future time. The structure will consist of the subject plus will have, and the verb is going to be in its past tense form. An example of this could be, they will have arrived in China by now. This sentence indicates that the action of arriving in China is expected to be completed before the current time. And then lastly, we have future progressive tense. This tense describes an action that will occur over a period of time in the future. The structure for this includes the subject plus will be plus the verb ending in ing. She will be moving into a new house next month. This indicates that the action of moving is going to take place and be ongoing at a future time. Understanding diction is crucial when we are trying to excel at the ATI TEAS exam. While diction is initially seen to simply refer to distinctive vocabulary choices and styles of expression used by the author and the speaker, it really actually encompasses multiple layers and facets. Good writers utilize diction to influence the tone and complexity of the text, making it formal and sophisticated or informal and relaxed. Diction also contributes to the strength or weaknesses of the text and can even help identify the speaker. Think of Shakespeare, for example. Let's use Chubby, my Maltese puppy, to illustrate how diction can completely transform a sentence without altering its meaning. Consider the sentence, Chubby enjoys walks in the park and naps in the sun. This uses simple diction, an informal voice, and weak word choice. Now we can rephrase it to, Chubby adores walks in the park and sun-soaked rests. Here, we're elevating that diction. It conveys the same idea, but it uses a stronger vocabulary. And finally, consider Chubby fancies jaunts around the parks and basking in both sun and slumber. Now we've introduced more complex diction, a formal voice, and strong words that evoke vivid imagery, yet the underlying meaning remains unchanged. The key takeaway is that by altering the diction, you can transform the entire essence of a text. Comedians don't just merely share humorous anecdotes, they carefully select amusing words to enhance their storytelling. Writers don't just narrate sad tales, they meticulously craft each word to evoke sorrow and agony in a tragedy. Consider your favorite television drama. The writers employ climactic and sensational dialogue to establish the atmosphere. As you become more familiar with identifying the deliberate word choices made by speakers and writers, your analytical skills will significantly sharpen for the TEAS. Run-on sentences lack clarity due to missing punctuation or conjunctions. You can identify run-ons by spotting two independent clauses, which are essentially two complete thoughts that each contain a subject and a verb and can stand alone as separate sentences. If you encounter a sentence where two independent clauses are crammed together without any conjunction or proper punctuation, you're likely looking at a run-on sentence. To fix this, you can do one of two things. You can divide it into two distinct sentences, or you can insert the necessary punctuation and conjunctions to properly connect the clauses. Let's analyze the example. Sue was out of the sugar she needed to make cookies. She had to go to the grocery store to get some. This sentence lacks the rhythm and pauses that help the reader understand the text. It includes two complete sentences. One, Sue was out of sugar she needed to make cookies. And two, she had to go to the grocery store to get some. These two independent clauses can stand as separate sentences, but we can also improve the original sentence by adding suitable conjunctions and punctuation. So for example, Sue was out of sugar she needed to make cookies, comma, adding the conjunction so, she had to go to the grocery store to get some. Now, with the addition of the conjunction and the comma, the sentence is not only technically correct, but it also reads easier. We can also just separate the sentences by adding a period. So Sue was out of sugar she needed to make cookies, period. She had to go to the grocery store to get some would also be another way of separating this run-on sentence. So what is narrative writing? A narrative is a form of writing that tells a story that may be crafted to motivate, educate, or entertain the reader. Narratives can encompass both factual and fictional elements. We're going to dive deeper into narrative structures that consist of characters, settings, conflicts, climax, and resolution. So what is a character? A character is an entity that performs an action or speaks within the story. For instance, Emily was browsing through a book when she exclaimed, "This is fascinating!" Or, the dolphin was leaping up out of the water. In these examples, Emily and the dolphin are both characters within our narrative writing. What is a setting? A setting refers to a time and place where the story unfolds. It can be either fictional or non-fictional and may vary throughout the story. For instance, the story begins on a sunny spring afternoon in a bustling city park where children are playing. Here, the sunny spring afternoon describes the time, and the bustling city park describes the location of the story. So what is a conflict? A conflict in a story is a challenge or an issue that's going to impact the characters or the setting, driving that narrative forward. For example, during a pivotal soccer game, the star player sprained his ankle, putting the championship at risk. This situation creates a significant problem in the story. A climax is a point in the story where tension and action reaches its highest intensity. So for example, in the final moment of the soccer game, with the team trailing by 1 goal, the injured star player decides to re-enter the game despite his sprained ankle. This is the moment where the problem and the stakes are at its highest, making it the climax. And then lastly, a resolution is a conclusion of the story where the conflict is resolved. So for example, the team won the soccer game. The team celebrates its hard-won championship and the players' gamble paid off. This brings a satisfying end to our story. So what's the difference between formal and informal language? Initially, consider your audience. Who are you communicating to? Formal language is a more appropriate language for professional and significant situations, such as giving a presentation at work, speaking with your colleagues, or writing a formal letter to your boss. On the other hand, informal language is suited for more casual interaction, such as conversations with family and close friends, texting, and writing a personal email or letter. So let's explore the distinction between these two types of language. Formal language typically utilizes complete sentences with correct grammar and vocabulary, while informal language often features shorter sentences with less stringent grammatical rules and simpler vocabulary. Contractions, which are abbreviated forms of words where an apostrophe replaces missing letters, are generally avoided in formal language but are commonly used in informal texts. For example, in formal settings, one might say "I would," rather as in informal settings, the contraction "I'd" would be acceptable. Idioms, which are figurative expressions unique to a language, are usually not used in formal language but can be freely used in informal communication. Additionally, formal writing often employs the passive voice to sound more objective or impersonal, as in the TEAS application form is complete. In contrast, informal language tends to use active voice, such as "I completed the TEAS application form." Phrasal verbs consist of verbs combined with a preposition or adverb, and they often take on meanings different from the individual words by themselves. While phrasal verbs are commonly used in informal language, they are typically avoided in formal language. Instead, formal contexts call for more direct synonyms that convey the same meaning. For example, in informal settings, you might use the phrasal verb "look into," which means to investigate or research something. Abbreviations, which are shortened forms of words, are not used in formal language, but are acceptable in informal contexts. Similarly, exclamation marks, which add emphasis or express strong emotion, are typically reserved for informal language and are generally avoided in formal writing. Lastly, we have imperative sentences, which are sentences that start with a verb and usually give a command or instruction, and are often found in informal language. In contrast, formal language usually employs more structured and polite forms of requests in order to convey instructions. When you're revising a formal text to make it more informal, it's about simplifying your language. It's best to replace complex words and phrases with simpler everyday language. You can use contractions when it's possible, and don't shy away from first person and second person pronouns. In contrast, when you're revising informal language to more formal language, focus on eliminating any kind of slang, contractions, or colloquial phrases, as well as casual pronouns like you and we. Replace these with more complex vocabulary, formal phrases, and third-person pronouns when appropriate. You also want to make sure that your sentences are grammatically correct as well as complete. So some examples of this could be, if we have an informal phrase, "We didn't get the stuff you asked for, sorry," we can make it more formal. "We regret to inform you that we were unable to procure the items you requested. And then if we're going in the opposite direction, starting with a formal phrase, the director submitted his resignation following the recent allegations, we can make it informal by saying the boss quit after these recent rumors. You're going to find that the TEAS is going to test you on the same information over several sections of the test. We talked extensively about topic, main idea, supporting details, and summary in our Reading Key Ideas and Details video. Here's a recap of the information that you are going to need to know when it comes to the English section of the TEAS with these various topics. First up, we have the topic sentence, which can be found as the first sentence in every paragraph on the TEAS. Here's a key point. You can often answer many exam questions just by reading the topic sentences. The rest is just elaboration, but pay close attention to supporting details if they are asked and when they are needed. On the TEAS, supporting details will align with the topic sentence in that same paragraph. So for a question that's asking about supporting details, you want to read the paragraph with the topic sentence that the question is asking about, and then choose the answer that is going to best fit based on that topic. You're going to have to do a little bit of practice in order to tie that information together. Next up, we have the main idea, and this is essentially the thesis statement. Think of it as the core message that the paragraph is trying to convey. You're often going to find it as the last sentence in the first paragraph. So if a question asks you about the main idea of the passage, quickly go to that last sentence of your first paragraph, mark your answer, and move on, because as you know, we don't have a whole lot of time to answer these questions on the TEAS. And then lastly, we have summary. So think about it when you were back in school and you had to summarize an essay. You usually begin with a conclusion or a restatement of your thesis. Similarly, a passage's summary is typically found as the first sentence in the last paragraph. Again, if you get a question about a passage's summary, go to that first sentence in the last paragraph, mark your answer, and move on. Next, we're going to explore logical order in paragraphs. We're going to see three different kinds of orders. We're going to see chronological order, spatial order, and order of most importance. With chronological order, this method is particularly useful when detailing a sequence of events. Consider the process of cooking a meal. You start by shopping for ingredients like vegetable and oil. Then you're going to prepare and mix the ingredients and finally serve the dish. Similarly, when writing about any sequence of events, we maintain a clear order because it is crucial in order to maintain clarity and coherence in the writing. Time order words, also known as chronological transitions, such as first, later, after that, then, next, and finally, aid writers in structurally organizing their ideas in a paragraph using a sequential manner. In terms of punctuation, a comma is typically placed after these time order words when we start a sentence. Chronological order words are essential for various purposes, including describing history of an event, narrating an experience in a story, explaining how to perform or create something, or outlining the steps in a process. It's important to note that chronological order is predominantly used in expository writing. This is a style where the writer may narrate, describe, and inform as well as explain a process. So let's take a look at our example. Emma maintains a specific routine on Sunday evenings. That's our topic sentence. First, she washes the dishes after lunch. Later, she sweeps the kitchen and her room. Then, she removes the dust from the TV, cupboards, and furniture surfaces. After that, she cleans the yard and waters the plants. Next, she irons her clothes and takes a bath. And finally, she goes out with her friends and stays out late. This sequence clearly illustrates the use of chronological order to organize events in a logical and easy-to-follow manner. Order of importance is a method commonly used for persuasion, convincing arguments, and ranking items by their significance or benefit, depending on the type of writing that you're going to see. You can choose to progress from the least important to the most important point, or begin with the most crucial point and work towards the less significant ones. For example, in persuasive essays, you're often going to lead with the most impactful statement, the most significant point, in order to grab the reader's attention right away and motivate them to continue reading. Now let's consider the following paragraph, which is structured based on the order of importance. The company operates with a straightforward management system. At the top, the president, who oversees the overall operation, makes all major decisions. Just below the president, the board handles daily decisions. Beneath the board members are the regional managers who supervise the branch of managers. Most importantly, almost as importantly, just as importantly, and finally, are some key transitional phrases that are used to effectively show the method of organization. These transitions help to clearly signal the hierarchy of points and arguments, guiding the reader through the structured flow of ideas. And last up, we have spatial order, and this is used to structure paragraphs with specific goals such as helping readers visualize a scene, engaging the senses like smell, sound, taste, touch, and sight. You're going to see this a lot with descriptive essays. The big memory trick here is that you will be using directional transition words. For instance, when we're describing items in a bedroom, we use spatial order. Essentially, you create a visual representation for the reader by choosing a starting point and then guiding them through the space as your description unfolds. So let's consider our example. Attached to the wall of my bedroom is a small wooden rack adorned with red and turquoise necklaces that shimmer upon entry. That is our starting point. Just to the right of the rack is a window framed by biliary white curtains. In sharp contrast to the peaceful image to the right of the window area, my desk sits cluttered with textbooks, crumbled papers, coffee cups, and an overflowing ashtray. Turning my head further to the right, I notice two bare windows framing the outdoor trees, presenting them like three-dimensional painting. Below, these windows rest on oak chests, bulging with blankets and scarves. Directly across from the fluttering curtains stands an antique dresser. On top of the dresser are jewelry boxes and several picture frames, and a tall mirror next to them occupies most of the wall, painted a soft shade of lavender. When employing spatial order in your writing, consider using the following transitional phrases to clarify the arrangement and relationship of elements within the space. Just to the left, just to the right, behind, between, on the left, or on the right, across from, a little further down, to the south, to the east, a few yards away, turning left, or turning right. These transitions help readers navigate the spatial layout you're describing, effectively guiding them throughout the scene or the setting. Unnecessary information in a text refers to any details or content that did not contribute to the main point or purpose of the writing. These extraneous elements can distract the reader, obscure the main idea, and make the text longer without adding any value. Effective writing should be concise and focused, meaning that removing unnecessary information helps to clarify and strengthen the message. For example, in our original text we have, Tom is an excellent graphic designer. This sentence is our topic sentence, our main point of the text. This means that everything following that sentence should provide supporting details about Tom being an excellent designer. So let's keep reading. He was born in 1989 in a small town of Maple Grove. He graduated from the University of Arts in 2011, where he studied many subjects, including graphic design, which is his passion. Tom loves to drink coffee and often goes to a cafe before work. He has won several awards for his innovative designs. Tom also enjoys hiking and photography during his weekends. So as we analyze this text, while the main focus should be on Tom's professional skills as a graphic designer, there are several details that did not contribute to the main point. So if we were to remove that unnecessary information, the paragraph should be, Tom is an excellent graphic designer. He graduated from the University of Arts in 2011, where he studied graphic design. He has won several awards for his innovative designs. We remove the sentences, he was born in 1989 in a small town of Maple Grove, Tom loves to drink coffee and often goes to a cafe before work, and Tom also enjoys hiking and photography during his weekends. These sentences were ultimately removed because they do not directly relate to Tom's professional skills or accomplishments as a graphic designer, which is what the text should focus on. Removing these details helps keep the reader's attention on the key information about Tom's career and his achievements. And lastly, we're going to talk about omitted information in a text. This refers to the pertinent details that were left out either intentionally or unintentionally, leading to a potential lack of clarity or incomplete understanding of the topic. In some cases, the omission is strategic to streamline the content and keep the reader focused on key points. In other cases, it may unintentionally obscure the full content or necessary background that the reader needs to grasp in order to understand the subject fully. So let's take a look at our example. Dr. Smith recommends that all her patients follow a specific diet to improve their heart health. So automatically, the topic sentence is telling us that there are recommendations for a specific diet to improve heart health. The next sentence says, this diet includes reducing sodium intake and increasing the consumption of whole grains. So while this text is informative, it lacks detailed guidance on how to implement this diet effectively. Important specifics that might have been omitted could provide practical advice or even examples, making the recommendation more actionable. So potential omissions could have been specific daily or weekly sodium intake limits, examples of whole grains to include in the diet, additional dietary recommendations or restrictions such as limiting saturated fats or increasing fruits and vegetables, and reasons why the diet helps improve heart health, including maybe lowering blood pressure and cholesterol, could be a few of the things that were omitted. These omissions, if addressed, could make the advice more practical and motivate for better compliance. I hope that this information was helpful in understanding knowledge of language. If you have any additional questions, make sure that you leave them down below. I love answering your questions. Head over to nursecheungstore.com where there's a ton of additional resources to help you ace those ATI TEAS exams. And as always, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!